And then myredbook.com, Republican on the no-fly list, former mafia member Greg Chappell, or whatever his real name is, told me that he worked at Varian in Palo Alto with the attorney dad of, Republican mob family, Herbert family members, My Red Book family members, George Herbert and Richard Herbert, felons. And it turns out, as you can see online on sites like p.ip.fi or paste2.org, that the ex-wife of Greg Chappell or Chapelsky or whatever his real name is, has family members that lived in Montana, where the Herberts had another property, and then I have to bring in Christian Clemmensen here again, because he attended Montana State University or whatever, so there's another connection back to the mob, myredbook.com, Republican felon family. And let's see, what else can I tell you? So the myredbook.com mob Republican felon Herbert family, the cousin that got booted from UC Santa Barbara for selling drugs, he was growing pot plants at the property in Inverness, Marin, Point Reyes, Inverness, Marin for a while, and of course, when I was young and naive and didn't know any better, I spoke to the Point Reyes, Inverness, Marin, myredbook.com, Republican felonious police department, and they laughed me out of the police department and told me I was crazy and stupid and all kinds of, called me all kinds of nasty names and stuff, and basically like crazy made me, gaslighted me, whatever you want to call it. And let's see, I'm trying to go back in time. Yeah, so then let's go back to Ben Baxt. So I was in La Jolla at the property Bird Rock Avenue. I was there with Richard and Ben, and they were having dinner, and I had no clue what BDSM was. I was way too young for that. And Ben, I remember, was like, oh, do you know who Anne Rice is? And I was like, no, who's Anne Rice? Or should I know who Anne Rice is? And so he said something about BDSM and Anne Rice, and I was like, okay, I have no idea what that is. I'll just let it go over my head. And I suspect like that, the mob myredbook.com Republican felon Herbert family, like they thought I knew that what BDSM was, and I didn't. I suspect they thought I did. I suspect like that, they thought I had a lot of sexual experience when I had none. And there's nothing wrong with that. I had planned on waiting till marriage to get involved with sex if I ever got married. And I told Richard that. I told myredbook.com Republican felon mob Herbert family Richard that. I told him in his little VW car out in front of their house on Waverly Lane, I was very clear that I intended to wait until marriage, if I ever got there, which I haven't, and I'm not going to. So until Mike Hess came along, I had no idea what BDSM was. He had some BDSM stuff in his closet, like a, what do you call it? Like a horse whip thing. And I just thought it was an interest of his to like go watch the horses race or something. And so I asked him about it. I was like, do you go watch the horses race? And he was like, "Are you kidding me?" And I was like, no, I'm not kidding you." And so then he explained to me what that was, that it was a BDSM crop or whatever, and what BDSM was. And at that point, I think I was about 26, 27, 28, something like that. I'm not entirely sure, but I was in my 20s. Obviously, Mike and his family knew the Herberts. And I can say that with confidence because there are a couple reasons. When I was growing up, like, I was always cold. Turns out I have anemia from fibroids, among other things. And fibroids interfere with your ability to get pregnant. And back in 2016, one of my fibroids was about 7 centimeters, and I had 2 other ovarian lesions that were kind of large. One I had surgically removed. It was 9 centimeters when it was surgically removed. And then I had one that was about 4 centimeters, and that one my OBGYN and I decided to leave more me. I didn't want to have a hysterectomy, and I didn't want to start menopause early. So that was my primary reason for leaving that one. And I know that those types of ovarian lesions, they grow at a rate of 1 millimeter or more per year. So I was hoping that it would grow very slowly. And I don't know if it has grown any larger than 4 centimeters since then. But yeah, I'm infertile. I always have been. But so yeah, I have anemia, and when I was growing up, I used to turn up the heat. My mom liked to keep the heat at or the house at 58 degrees or some ridiculous temperature like that, and I was always cold. So at one point she put this plastic cover on top of the thermostat in the house. Duh! There's a hole at the top and a hole at the bottom. So, stick a finger or two in there, turn up the heat. Stick a, fork or a knife or something, turn up the heat. So I'm at Mike's little apartment in Sunnyvale at one point, and he was exactly like my mom and kept the heat really, really cold. Well, not heat, but he kept his place really cold there in Sunnyvale. So sometimes when we leave, I would turn up the heat. And he knew that I used to turn up the heat at my parents' house. And the reason he knew that is because he knew the myredbook.com mob Herbert felon family. Then on another occasion, Mike and I and some of his friends were at a pizza slash pasta slash seafood place in Los Gatos, and he ordered calamari. I remember that. And I will never eat calamari. Ever, 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 ever. And he was like, "Aren't you going to eat some calamari?" And I looked at him and I was like, "Hell no." And he knew that the first time that I was forced to go on a date, if you want to call it that, with the myredbook.com mob Herbert family member, Richard, we went to a restaurant in the Monterey area, somewhere over there, and he ordered calamari, and I was having none of it, and I didn't even want to be on this quote-unquote date, and I just wanted to leave. I wanted to leave, and I made a point of letting him know that I didn't want to be there, and that I wanted to leave. And so we did leave pretty shortly after he finished his calamari or got halfway through it or whatever. Long story short, so Richard and his family had been, threatening my mom, George Herbert, mob family member, mafia family, whatever, felon, myredbook.com Republican. He and my mom worked together, and he had been threatening my mom. So that's why I ended up on that screwed up date, if you want to call it that, because it wasn't a date. So Mike knew about that, obviously. So there's your connection to the myredbook.com mob Herbert felon family again. And where am I on this video? Next video.